this is a natural progression in a lot of product categories. Like when I used to work on Quicken for personal finance, it's like, yeah, you can go run any report you want, but wouldn't it be great if it told you about important things and anomalies and trends that it noticed? So I think that's an exciting trend in analytics.
We're back to, we've got all of our metrics. We know what we're measuring. We know how to operationalize it. That's a hard word to say. How do you connect these product metrics to business success metrics?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is I often find companies where their high level business metrics, like that come from the finance system, they're crystal clear. They know exactly what they sold last quarter. They know which product sold. They know how much each customer bought. So it's like this finance high level business, but then they can't tie it down. And then conversely, you might know, oh, the conversion rate of this landing page is X, or the usage of this feature is Y, but there's like the tops down and the bottom up don't meet. And that can be, that's really the trick. And going back to the OKRs, one thing we didn't talk about is how do you cascade them, right? So if as a company or as a business unit, we're trying to say grow revenue 15% this quarter or this year, and I've got different teams, like how do we divide that up into more meaningful things? Grow revenue is unactionable, right? At a high level, that's what I like to say, like it's unactionable. Grow revenue 50%, go team. It's like, okay, well, are we trying to get more new customers? Are we trying to upsell the existing customers, getting higher revenue? We're trying to decrease churn. Like there's multiple ways to grow revenue, add a new revenue stream, launch a new product. So that's what you want to divide those down so that basically they cascade down and then conversely, when you look up, it all adds up. It's like, yeah, we think, and that's where the kind of calibration goes in. It's like, well, we came up with a set of strategies and things to do for the quarter. We don't think it's going to quite grow it by 15%, maybe 12%. So then you have a feedback loop and you go, okay, well, let's do 12%, or let's agree that 15% is a stretch goal, those kind of things. So that is really like the black box, the kind of black magic of this trying to be very quantitative and causal, having the cause and effect here, it's like Noam underpants. It's like make profit, build good product. Well, how do those connect? You know what I mean? And a lot of times I'll be talking to a client like, yeah, we're going to launch this new feature. And they're going to work, so many people months on it. They're going to launch this feature. I'm like, great. How are you going to capture that value you just create? How are you going to monetize it? Like, well, we'll just increase customer satisfaction. Our retention rate will go down. Like that's like the fallback is it'll be a better. And so, in that case, you very loosely tied it to revenue. Obviously, if you launch a new service offering, a new tier, hey, we just launched a gold tier that we're going to charge, twice as much per month. That's kind of obvious to see the direct thing there. So that's part of it is doing that. And that is the trick, but I think it involves how you do it is you have good discussions between product management and the people that are working the financial metric. Obviously, I think in a well-functioning organization, product management is pretty involved with that, working with the GMs or the business side or the finance team, whoever's kind of heavily involved with that, so that when they're not just going, yep, okay, we're going to dial in 15% growth in the spreadsheet, go figure out how, and it's decoupled from any actual plan. You know what I mean? So having that tight operational planning, financial and operational planning, is key. And I'll say it's difficult, and there are not tons of companies that are excelling at that, but I see a lot of companies, trying to improve and get better at that.
How do you think about the ideal tech stack for being data driven? Like what's needed?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if I have a really good answer on this one. I mean, I just think it should be kind of tech agnostic. There are obviously solutions that you can go with. And I think in general, as a PM, I think of the requirements of the problems, and that's what I focus on is like, can we get a tool that that is easy to install, right? And most of these tools are, because it's a third party, is a JavaScript include, right? Do we have a tool that kind of makes it easy to quickly run reports and graphs and turn those into dashboards that I can then disseminate to people in the organization, right? So I think like I hate to say it, but the core functionality of the basic requirements, I think like a lot of places solve it. And now one area, some places really get into homegrown tools, right? It's like they build their own tools. They get third-party visualization tools and put them on top of their database and things like that. I personally think a hybrid approach is better than that. I think that the third-party tools are so good, you should use them. Like you don't want to be doing retention rate calculations. That's silly. Why would you, if you're in the business of building some other product, why would you have a whole team of engineers and stuff kind of calculating retention rate, right? That and doing cohort curve visualizations and things like that. It's just so. Of course, there is good data in your database. It is a good source of truth. But so I think a hybrid approach and frankly, like a tool agnostic approach is good. I mean, the fundamentals of good analytics, I feel like are pretty baked into the top tools that are out there.
Are there times when you have had assumptions that you've found are wrong based on looking at analytics, or worked with companies where, you've found that, the assumptions around the happy path, or, what customers are doing and what you thought customers would do just ended up being completely off?
Yeah, I think it happens all the time. And I think there's two parts to it. One is you had an active assumption that was wrong. What I see probably more commonly is like a lack of awareness. There's an ignorant, you didn't even think about X, right? Like I remember a long time ago, we started looking at like kind of like server uptime data, and all of a sudden, or like the number of users or something. And every Wednesday at a certain time, the number of users would drop into half, and then it would go back up. And it's like, And it turns out we had like 2 data centers, and for some reason, like one data center would always go down on Wednesday at a certain time. So so when you see funny numbers in there, like 2x or 10x or something, you start to see patterns like that. And that there's actually an interesting thing. Sometimes it's the reality. Sometimes it's an artifact of the data, especially in the early phases. I call it the data hygiene, the metrics hygiene phase. You may be, let's track how many people are using this feature. And it's like you're double counting, or you're not counting the right thing, things like that, right? But this happens all the time. And it can happen both with analytics as well as qualitative data. I was just listening to a very interesting and awesome talk by the founder of Weebly, and he was just talking about the need to like do rapid prototyping and experimentation. And in the interest of kind of conversion rate optimization and UX design, they had streamlined their sign up form to only have email and password, right? They're like, it's great. In general, if you want to like reduce friction and improve conversion rate, reduce the number of fields, reduce the required fields, reduce the clicks, reduce the time, reduce the cognitive load. So they took that to the extreme. And then they decided, you know what, because they had seen the value of it, even though they were pretty confident that was going to be a good change, they decided to do some user testing. And they did user testing, and to their shock, like no one was logging in. They're like, what's going on? They're like, no one was signing up. And the reason why is like, well, this is a login form. It just had, they were confused because it just said email and password. And they had deliberately taken off the double entry of the password and the double entry of the email just to reduce friction. And so their hack, all they did is they added a name field, and that just kind of broke people's pattern matching to do it. But that's an example. Those things happen all the time. If you don't look, you're basically flying blind, if you don't look. And I would say too, the other thing is, the other perspective that having good baseline analytics can help you is, we're pushing new code every week or two. And if you're doing continuous deployment, you're doing all the time. Stuff can break. So we're, as product people, we're trying to like always move the needle up and move the metrics up. Inadvertent things happen all the time, especially with complex products. You change a widget over here and has some unknown consequence over here, right? And so I've seen a lot of times where tracking baseline metrics, you have no idea why, but you suddenly realize, gosh, did we just do a release? Yeah, why? Well, because conversion rate just like is 1/10 of what it used to be. And you realize, oh, somebody, you know what I mean? So it's good to play defense or catch problems. And if you think about it, I was just talking about this with another client. I kind of come from a lean industrial engineering approach. I like the system to be under control. I view these metrics as little dials and knobs that you kind of control. It's like, okay, we got conversion rate to 15%. We got retention rate, 30-day retention rate to 16%. We got, now what do we want to do? We can talk about which one is we're going to try to improve. But as you're proactively pushing code, you might actually mess one of those up by accident. So having those dashboards is like an early warning system to be like, oh, hey, we need to go back and fix that, right? In fact, speaking of advanced stuff, some advanced continuous deployment stuff is tied into those key metrics, especially in the e-commerce space, because you'll see the orders dive and you'll see the revenue dive. And so they'll do like automated, if you get really, really complicated, you'll do an automated rollback. You'll be like, hey, if average purchase volume suddenly goes down by this and you set some more thresholds, then it'll do like an automated rollback.
So last question for you. what have you seen out there that are like cool advances or great new capabilities in product analytics?
Yeah, I think there's, it's an exciting time. Basically, several things. So, the way I like to think about it is a good package analytics tool is going to let you go out there and like do what if analysis. You go, oh, I wonder what's going on here. How many people are using this feature? How many people are uploading photos? How many people are sharing photos? You can get all this kind of answer, right? But the idea is you have to come up with the question and you have to go look for it, right? And I know that a similar thing happens with retention. Like I'm a big proponent that you need to track retention, right? I teach my workshops and my talks, and I convince people, I explain how retention is the ultimate measure of product market fit, how if your retention curves go to zero, you don't have product market fit. And then the natural takeaway is, okay, if you're not tracking retention, you need to start tracking retention. That's where you want to use a third-party tool, not do it yourself, right? So then I see the excitement in everybody's eyes when they have their own retention curve for the first time. They're like, hey, cool, I can see my retention curve, right? And hopefully it's non-zero. Now, the reality is too, is you when you do a retention curve, if you put all the users together, they're going to be in one thing. And then you realize, oh, let's do cohort analysis. That's the next progression is, instead of putting all my users in one bucket, let me divide them into different buckets and see the rate at which the water, by the way, a retention curve is like plotting the water level in the bucket over time. So if you think of the bucket as being 100% full, and then you just like turn off the faucet of new users coming in and you just track the water level over time, that just shows you kind of what the water level is in the bucket is over time, right? So you might want to compare different cohorts. And a cohort, you can divide your user base into any kind of cohort. The most common way is by when they signed up, right? Let's take the January cohort and see what their retention curve is. Let's look at the February cohort. And then I see the excitement in people's eyes when they plot a few cohorts, like 3 or 4, and then they turn on like 20 cohorts and they're all crisscrossing and it's a big mess. You can't tell what the hell's going on, right? And then you get to the level of, okay, well, let me segment the group into the people that used feature A and the people that didn't use feature A. And so of course there's the average line. And then typically the people that use feature A, they have a higher retention. The people that didn't have a lower retention, and the middle line is the weighted average of those two. That can be really telling to be like, huh, what features? But if you wanted to like automatically identify which features make a difference, you have to go and run those all manually. That's what I mean by the what if analysis, right? So some cool things you see is that starting to get automated, where systems are automatically telling you, hey, I happen to run a bunch of regressions and I noticed the events that tend to improve this are these, and it'll show you a confidence band, things like that, right? So it basically, and in general, instead of it being like, well, you can go try to find any answer you want, the system starts telling you proactive insights, right? Whether it's, hey, your conversion rate, just this metric just dropped by 10%, kind of like what I was alluding to in that rollback scenario, right? Where it's like automatically surfacing insights to you. That's kind of, I think, the next exciting phase for a lot of these analytics packages, where instead of it being like, yes, this tool can let me do whatever I want, it flips it around. And now it's like that. And we had a similar, this is a natural progression in a lot of product categories. Like when I used to work on Quicken for personal finance, it's like, yeah, you can go run any report you want, but wouldn't it be great if it told you about important things and anomalies and trends that it noticed? So I think that's an exciting trend in analytics.
All right, so thank you so much, Dan. That was a great session on analytics and metrics. I feel like I've learned a huge amount myself. And where can people learn more if they want to read up more about analytics and metrics?
Well, thanks a lot, Rachel. It was great to discuss this with you. My website is dan-olsen.com, dan-olsen.com. That has links to a bunch of stuff. If people want to learn more about my book, I have 2 chapters of my book that focus on analytics optimization with some good case studies. I also have free talks that you can check out on analytics optimization from that website as well. And then for the product people out there, I run a lean product meetup that I've been running for 7 years. Meetup.com/lean-product. Keep's actually a sponsor of that. We bring in top speakers each month. So I'd recommend that resource to people as well.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks.